in 1950. Today we remember the spirits and sacrifice of Theodore Faulkner and Isaac Fonseca and Carlton de Castro, and so many unnamed of our ancestors without whom there would be no House of Assembly today. Thank you, God of the ever-present and the Ancient of Days. Thank you for these milestones and the liberating sojourn of our people. Remove from us, dear God, the sin of disremembering, and remind us that it is better to live courageously than cowardly. Remind us that it is better to live truthfully than in deceit. And especially for those in this House of Assembly, keep them from slipping. Remind them that they are to be good stewards. Remind them that they are to be meticulous trustees. Remind them that they are to be faithful caregivers of this people and this place. And so may it be in this House of Assembly that these women and men will produce a record of excellence. This is our prayer in the name of our elder brother, Jesus the Christ. Amen.
Amen. Please be seated. The third sitting of the third session of the Fourth House of Assembly of the Virgin Islands has now convened. I call upon the clerk.
Item number 2, announcements by the Speaker.
A pleasant good morning to all, and I acknowledge those who have tuned in on different communication platforms. I also thank all honorable members, despite our long days and nights in our Standing Finance Committee hearings, that you readily agreed to be here for another sitting. With that said, I call upon the clerk.
Item number 3, statements by ministers. Presentation of papers.
Okay, it was my understanding that there is no statements. Therefore, I call upon the Premier and Minister of Finance to lay his documents on the table.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to lay on the table the following documents. I, Roman numeral I, Statutory Instrument 2020 number 132, a proclamation by His Excellency the Governor under Section 83, subsection 1 of the Virgin Islands Constitution Order 2007, UK Standard SI 2007 number 1678, appointing the time and place at which the third sitting of the third session of the Fourth House of Assembly of the Virgin Islands shall be held. Roman numeral 2, British Virgin Islands Financial Investigation Agency 2018 Annual Report. Roman numeral 3, British Virgin Islands Investigation Agency 2020 Budget Estimates. Roman numeral 4, Statutory Instrument 2020 number 127, Imposition of a Curfew number 37, Order 2020, and Roman numeral 5, Statutory Instrument 2020 number 131, Imposition of a Curfew number 38, Order 2020.
Thank you. Members, pursuant to the Curfew Act of 2017, Section 3.2, the floor is now open on the imposition of the curfew number 37 and 38. After observing no one wish to participate in a debate, I call upon the clerk.
Item number 5, notices of motions given orally.
I call upon the Premier and Minister of Finance to give notice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to give notice that at a later stage in the proceedings, I will seek leave to move the motion standing in my name under item 6.1, Roman numeral 4, and Roman numeral 5 on the order of the day.
Thank you. I call upon the Minister of Health and Social Development to give notice.
Speaker, stand to give notice that at a later stage in the proceedings, I will seek leave to move the motions standing in my name under item 6.1, Roman numeral 1 through 3 on the order of the day.
Thank you. I call again upon the Premier to move a motion in regards to the order of the day.
You mean to remove? Yeah. You want to do that now? Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move a motion to remove from the order paper from public business 6.1 sub Roman numeral 4, Mr. Speaker, which is the Data Protection Act. I'll ask for removal for that from the paper, from the order paper from today. I so move.
Second for me. Mr. Speaker, I second the motion.
A motion has been moved and seconded for the removal of the Data Protection Act 2019 from the order of the day. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. The order of the day is so amended. I call upon the Minister for Health and Social Development. I'm sorry, I call upon the clerk.
Item number 6, public business. Item number 1, government business.
I now call on the Minister for Health and Social Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move a motion for the introduction and first reading of the bill entitled COVID-19 Control and Suppression Miscellaneous Provisions Amendment Number 2, Act 2020. Mr. Speaker, I move that leave be granted to introduce the bill standing in my name, shortly entitled COVID-19 Control and Suppression Miscellaneous Provisions Amendment Number 2, Act 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to second the motion.
It has been moved and seconded that leave to introduce the bill shortly entitled COVID-19 Control and Suppression Miscellaneous Provision Amendment Number 2, Act 2020 be granted. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. I call upon the Minister of Health and Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move a motion for the suspension of Standing Order 52-2 to allow for the second reading of the bill entitled COVID-19 Control and Suppression Miscellaneous Provision Amendment Number.
Step on page 3 of the procedural guide.
There we go. Mr. Speaker, I introduce the bill standing in my name shortly entitled COVID-19 Control and Suppression Miscellaneous Provisions Amendment Number 2, Act 2020. Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill shortly entitled COVID-19 Control and Suppression Miscellaneous Provision Amendment Act 2020 be now read the first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to second the motion. Thank you.
Been moved and seconded that the bill shortly entitled COVID-19 Control and Suppression Miscellaneous Provision Amendment Number 2 Act 2020 be now read for a first time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Therefore, I call upon the clerk to read the bill for the first time.
This act may be cited as the COVID-19 Control and Suppression Miscellaneous Provisions Amendment Number 2, Act 2020.
Thank you. I call upon the Minister for Health and Social Development in regards to the suspension of standing orders.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I jumped the gun a little bit there. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move a motion for the suspension of Standing Order 52-2 to allow for the second reading of the bill entitled COVID-19 Control and Suppression Miscellaneous Provisions Amendment Number 2 Act 2020. Mr. Speaker, sir, I move that Standing Order number 52-2 be suspended to allow for the bill shortly entitled COVID-19 Control and Suppression Miscellaneous Provisions Amendment Number 2 Act 2020 be read a second time.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to second the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable members. It has been moved and seconded that Standing Order number 52-2 be suspended to allow the bill entitled COVID-19 Control and Suppression Miscellaneous Provision Amendment Number 2 Act 2020 to be read a second time. Those in favor? Those against? The motion is passed. Therefore, I call upon the Minister for Health and Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the second and third reading of the bill entitled COVID-19 Control and Suppression Miscellaneous Provisions Amendment Act 2020. Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill shortly entitled COVID-19 Control and Suppression Miscellaneous Provisions Amendment Number 2 Act 2020 be read a second time. And while I am standing, Mr. Speaker, I would like to just have a brief introduction, if I may. Mr. Speaker, as we steadily approach the reopening of our borders on December 1st, and as our health and tourism sectors continue to prepare, one of the main reasons we are here today in this honorable House is to ensure the passage of an act to amend the COVID-19 Control and Suppression Miscellaneous Provisions Act 2020, number 5 of 2020. In my customary fashion, I would like to provide the territory's epidemiological survey or summary. To date, Mr. Speaker, 7,023 persons were tested at the Dr. D. Orlando Smith Hospital, and currently no active cases are being reported or identified as at today, which leaves us, Mr. Speaker, at 72 total positive cases of COVID-19 recorded, 71 of which have recovered, and one unfortunate death. I would like to highlight that today marks a number of days since our last active cases were detected on the 13th of October 2020, and an impressive amount since our last patient had recovered on the 23rd of October 2020. Mr. Speaker, as a territory, we as a territory should continue to be grateful to God for the continued mercy bestowed upon us, because as we prepare to reopen, the rest of the world around us seem to be shutting down. It does not go unnoticed. Globally, as of 24th November 2020, the World Health Organization has reported 58,900,547 confirmed cases of COVID-19, including 1,393,305 deaths. These figures will continue to remind us that we are clearly not out of the woods, as there is still more to be done. The government of the Virgin Islands, including the public and private partners and stakeholders, are working around the clock to reopen, and the goal of welcoming incoming travelers into the territory as safely as possible, and while keeping our residents and workforce to be as safe, again, as possible. With that in mind, we cannot do without the necessary legislations, guidance, and protocols. The COVID-19 Control and Suppression Miscellaneous Provisions Act No. 5, Act of 2020, will allow for an amendment to be made to the regulation cited as the COVID-19 Control and Suppression, which actually maintains the entry of persons, Regulations 2020, which shall come into force on December 1, 2020. The COVID-19 Control and Suppression Entry of Persons Regulations 2020 will allow for the entry of persons traveling in the territory, including persons who are deemed to belong to the territory, persons who are holders of certificates of residence, work permit holders, and tourists will be subject to specific requirements and conditions, including testing, monitoring, quarantine, and self-isolation measures, protecting public health and for the prevention, control, and suppression of the spread of the COVID-19 virus, and for any other purpose provided therein. As it pertains to the pre-entry requirements, a person who intends to travel to and enter the territory shall, prior to arrival in the territory, be required to register and provide the relevant information required to travel on the BVI Gateway Travel Application Portal and download the approved app software. B, obtain a certified COVID-19 negative test results within 5 days prior to arrival into the territory. C, submit the certified COVID-19 negative results obtained under paragraph B to the BVI Gateway Travel Application Portal. D, provide evidence of his or her travel insurance policy, which includes coverage for medical repatriation, quarantine accommodations costs, and COVID-19 medical costs, including hospitalizations, doctor's visit, and prescription. And E, obtain a travel authorization certificate issued by the Public Health Unit. Number 2, with the exception of A, persons who are deemed to belong to the territory, and B, persons who are holders of certificate of residence under Section 18 of the Immigration and Passport Act. Mr. Speaker, it is important to note that a person who tests positive for COVID-19 prior to arrival in the territory shall not be allowed to enter the territory. Number 3, Mr. Speaker, the COVID-19 test under Regulation 1 shall be performed by a government-approved medical laboratory whose professional status and practicing certificates can be verified with the applicable regulatory authority in the jurisdiction where the test is undertaken. Mr. Speaker, the regulations also makes provisions for the screening and testing upon arrival. Subject to Regulation 4, a person shall, upon arrival in the territory, adhere to the relevant COVID-19 enactments and protocols in the territory, including the relevant physical distancing protocol, wearing of masks and sanitization measures, and be subject to the approved screening measures that include temperature checks and testings for COVID-19. Mr. Speaker, in addition to the requirements under sub-regulations, a person shall, upon arrival in the territory, be required to submit the travel authorization certificate issued by the Public Health Unit under Regulation 41E and the COVID-19 test results to the relevant authorized officer upon request. So, Mr. Speaker, in the provisions that members would have, Section 2, again, the COVID-19 Control and Suppression Miscellaneous Act will be amended, Section 2(1)(a), by inserting after the words 14, the words "or for any period otherwise prescribed." This allows, Mr. Speaker, for any additional quarantine period that we may have to look at in order for our safety. And under 2B, Mr. Speaker, Section 2(1)(b), by inserting after the words 14 days, the words "or for any period otherwise prescribed." In number 3, Mr. Speaker, the Principal Act is amended by inserting after Section 5 the following new section in regulations. It will be 5A. 1. Cabinet may make regulations generally as is necessary or expedient for the proper carrying out of the provisions of this Act, and in particular, but without prejudice to the generality of the foregoing, may make regulations in respect to A, measures and requirements for incoming passengers in the territory, including pre-entry requirements for screening, testing, quarantine, self-isolation measures, use of electronic monitoring devices, or any other monitoring mechanism. B, the circumstances and the manner in which matters generally relating to the prevention, control, and suppression of COVID-19 may be addressed in the territory. And C, any other matter or thing that by this Act may be prescribed. So, Mr. Speaker, we said all of that to basically say that since COVID-19 had been declared a pandemic in March of 2020, the government of the Virgin Islands have expended millions of dollars in protecting lives and livelihoods, Mr. Speaker. And in so doing, we've had to have two specific, one in terms of total lockdown and one in terms of a partial, in order to put measures and facilities in place. At the Dr. D. Orlando Smith Hospital, we've expanded the capabilities of our clinic so that, of our particular hospital, in the laboratory, the tests that are announced here today, save for the first 80 or 86, all of these tests were completed here at the Dr. D. Orlando Smith Hospital laboratory. We have looked in terms of providing isolation beds and facilities. We are expanding so that any virus that may come to our shores, again, there will be isolation wards specific for the cause. We have looked in terms of pre-testing or testing capabilities. We have looked in terms of quarantining or having the quarantine measures amended so that if you were to come in contact with a person while in the territory, that the laws provided for that person to be quarantined effectively. Mr. Speaker, we've also looked in terms of opening our borders partially in terms of the airport, and have looked to provide facilities for the safe arrival of passengers, residents, and belongers so that they can be quarantined for the 14-day period. We have amended, and we look at in terms of opening our borders. So we have then again adjusted to where we, on December 1st, and we have some test cases going on as we speak, where we will be able to test before arrival, test on arrival, have the 4-day quarantine period, and then test, and if so, have the persons be free to enjoy the territory. Mr. Speaker, but there are no written script for this. So there, from time to time, we will have provisions such as this so that we can make amendments because we are looking at the experience not only of our own, but of other island nations that would accept visitors to the territory, and the laws doesn't make specific provisions for the unique circumstances that will be faced from time to time. This is one such that, you have persons of legal minds who will come and they will see the measures put in place as one that will impede on the rights of movement. But, Mr. Speaker, every territory have the right to make laws and provisions that will protect lives and livelihoods, and the citizens have done a great job in terms of adhering to all of these that we have done. We have to give kudos, we have to give recommendations or commendations to the persons for maintaining our particular record, where we can today say, in spite of the 7,023 tests, 72 has been identified as positive, 71 recovered, and we are now moving into another stage. When we look at what is being monitored in other islands, other places, other nations, Mr. Speaker, there are some people who hold that we should not open. That cannot attain. There are some people who hold that we should have no provisions. That cannot attain. So what is best? How can we measure? How can we get the two together so that we can protect lives while protecting livelihoods? And each of the industries of which we speak, specifically to a tourism product or online hotels or floating hotels, and the persons who will come to visit families, their concerns being raised. But when you look at the places from which they come, United States and Canada and Central America, throughout the Caribbean, in the East, whether it's from UK, from Spain, from Italy, we are well aware of what is going on in the world. So we have to be mindful, and we're not going to overrate it, underrate it, but we're going to be mindful of what we have to put in place in order for us to remain safe as a territory. So, Mr. Speaker, I move that this bill be read a second time.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to second the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, for giving us your objectives and reasoning, and the bill has been seconded. The floor is now open for debate. I recognize the Deputy Premier and Minister for Education, Culture, Youth Affairs, Fisheries and Agriculture, and member for the 7th District, Dr. the Honorable Natalio D. Whitley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I could not allow this bill to go undebated. I think it's important that we at least say a few words about, in addition to what the minister rightly did in terms of explaining the objects and reasons, but I'll just go a bit more broadly, Mr. Speaker. As we know, COVID-19 is creating havoc across the world. We haven't seen something like COVID-19 in over 100 years with the Spanish influenza. I have not been keeping up with the deaths around the world, but it's certainly, Mr. Speaker, well up there. I know in the United States of America, for instance, there must be well over 250,000 deaths. Over 260,000 deaths. And in the rest of the world as well, you see large numbers for their population. Mr. Speaker, COVID-19 cannot be dismissed as something that's just another flu, which I've heard some people say. Well, the flu kills people every year. We cannot compare the flu to COVID-19. Of course, we know that you have persons throughout the world who, for one reason or the other, they might have a flu and it becomes a pneumonia. Perhaps persons who are homeless, persons who are not well taken care of. But the potential that COVID-19 has in our society to kill persons, no one can tell me that the flu has that same potential to kill persons. So we must dismiss this notion from our minds, Mr. Speaker, that this COVID-19 is not anything serious. I've heard persons say, well, you can get COVID-19 and it's certainly not a death sentence, Mr. Speaker, but you are rolling the dice on your people. Mr. Speaker, I've even heard persons say, which I find disappointing. I find it very disappointing, Mr. Speaker. I've heard some persons say there was a story run, I believe on 284 Media, about COVID-19 having an outbreak in the Bahamas.
Minister, I think we have lost your mic.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There was a story, I believe it was on 284 Media, about an outbreak of COVID-19 and in another country, I believe it might have been the Bahamas. And persons in the comments, Mr. Speaker, were actually saying, well, only this amount of persons died, or only this percentage of the population died, 1%. God forbid one of those persons who said that, they had a family member who died. And we have to say, Mr. Speaker, some people say people die every day. It would not be a responsible government that took that approach to life in a society. We have to take the approach that one person is one too much. In fact, I'm gut-wrenched that we had someone within our society who passed away from COVID-19. I'm gut-wrenched about it. And some persons, if you don't know the person, or maybe the person doesn't have the same origin as you, it doesn't hit you the same way. But what does the Bible say? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's somebody's sister. That's somebody's mother. That's somebody's wife. That's somebody's child. We don't have to wait until it happens. We don't have to wait until it happens to you to be able to feel compassion and sympathy for others. So this is our starting point, Mr. Speaker. Our starting point should always be, let us do all we can to protect life. Because once you have life, you have a chance. But if you do not have life, you're in serious problems. That's it for you. We'll see what happens after death. But as it pertains to life on this planet, that's it. Once life is gone, it's gone. So the approach that this administration, under the leadership of Honorable Andrew Ford, and with the fine, let me just emphasize, fine leadership of the Minister of Health and the HEOC team, has been to protect life and then we go from there. We solve the other problems that we have. And it presents a difficult balance, Mr. Speaker. And all over the world, persons have been wrestling with how do we achieve the right balance. Again, we have to dismiss this concept that just let COVID-19 into your society, because your economy will not be able to function with COVID-19 spreading throughout your society. Let's just dismiss that. Let's take a look all over the world. You had several countries and territories who decided, you know what, we're not going to let this COVID-19 stop us. And they did not take proper measures early in the game. And guess what happened? COVID-19 spread, and they eventually had to shut down anyway. Because no government, and this is instructions directly from the World Health Organization, no government can not take measures to stop the unmitigated spread of COVID-19. Every government must take responsible measures to ensure that it stays out of your society, and if it's in your society, that it's contained. So, states in the United States, they say, you know what, we're going to let our economy function, and we're going to carry on. They had to end up shutting down. They shut down bars, they shut down schools, they shut down all types of different things. Okay? If you look at the difference, Mr. Speaker, between how some countries handle it and others, the difference could not be more stark. Certain Asian countries you have out there, Mr. Speaker, because, and we know that they have a different government system, but when their government takes action, the population complies, which is important. Having respect for leadership in your society is important. Persons being disciplined and adhering to measures, that's important. And when we have countries who take some measures to limit some of your, what you might see as what's convenient for you, for a greater good, there is some value in that. And in some of the Asian countries, you see that. I was told in certain Asian countries that a crowd size, we're complaining for crowd sizes of 50 and 100 persons. There are some Asian countries where the crowd size was 2 persons. You could not gather in a crowd of more than 2 persons. Your movements were limited. They closed down walk. You could not cross borders from one state to the next. And most times you would say, well, these are violations of civil liberties. But then those same countries completely eliminated COVID-19. And they were able to live as normally after they eliminated and stamped out COVID-19. Some of them saw a wave number 2, a wave number 3, a wave number 4. But then they took the same measures and they overcome these different waves. They had technology to help them contact trace. Again, some persons will say, what about civil liberties? These measures are responsible, they are necessary to be able to defeat COVID-19 and to prepare and to protect life, which is where we have to start. That is our starting point. Now, the United States, Mr. Speaker, is clearly, I would say, one of the worst examples in several states in the United States of how you manage COVID-19. Because we have persons who, in the United States clearly, and you hear them on the news, you hear them speaking and arguing, they would sacrifice life for a dollar. You have persons like that who will sacrifice life for the sake of making money. We know money is important. We know we need money to do things in society, but money cannot become more important than life. And in the United States, you have persons who are saying, the government is robbing me of my freedom. What about the freedom to live? What about the right to life? That's the most important freedom that has to be protected. So, Mr. Speaker, the response that this administration has taken has been a very responsible response. And by the time this whole thing is over and the noise quiets down, with God's help, if we continue along this path, I would say that we would have been one of the best in the world to manage COVID-19. We have persons right now who can walk outside. Yes, we have measures in place, but we have persons who can walk outside without that weight of oppressive fear that my life is in danger. You can see it. You could see it when we had the little spike in COVID-19, the fear that overtook the community. There was a fear in the community. That fear has left for the most part. And now we're getting ready to open up our borders, and among members of our population, there's some persons who have some fear. We understand why we have to open, because we cannot stay closed forever. We understand that we have businesses, particularly in tourism, which are suffering and need some economic activity. And because we are intelligent persons, we understand that we will be able to open up and take measures to ensure that we certainly limit the possibility of having any outbreaks in the Virgin Islands. Because we're intelligent persons and we're creative. We have good ideas. We sit down together, we exchange these ideas. We speak with each other, and we come up with solutions to potential problems. That is what we do. So we got together, and with the advice of our health officials and with conversation and collaboration with multiple entities, Airport Authority and Tourist Board, and just an excellent collaborative effort. And this includes, Mr. Speaker, members of the private sector, members of the business community, contrary to what is being promoted in some quarters, because I've sat in on the Zoom calls and I've sat in on the meetings. It has been a wonderful collaborative approach. And we put forward ideas. Sometimes there's need for revision. And I have to congratulate the Minister of Finance and Premier, because despite how some persons would have you think about him, I've never seen a leader more willing to go back to the drawing board and correct something through collaboration and through listening. Now, don't get me wrong, he's a leader, and he's going to lead. But every good leader knows how to listen. Every good leader knows how to be able to revisit something. Being humble enough to be able to revisit something. And I believe that the protocols that we now have a good balance between health and being able to have some sort of tourism season. Will not be a tourism season like before, and Pawson should not expect it to be. COVID-19 is real. Look at all of the places where we expect tourists to come from. They're exploding with COVID-19. It will not be like before, and Pawson should not expect it to be. But we will, what does the Premier say? Half a loaf is better than no loaf at all. And we have to take this thing slowly. To expect that you have a flood of visitors in on December 4th is not responsible. Let's get some persons in. Let's evaluate, see if there are any adjustments that we need to make, and let's continue to build momentum. That's what responsible leaders do. So, the Premier and the rest of us were able to revisit the protocols we have, and we have something that I believe is good. Some of the discontent, Mr. Speaker, that Parsons had with the protocols had to do with quarantine. And I just want to speak a little bit about quarantine, Mr. Speaker. These protocols are basically being enacted in law with this amendment. That's what we're doing. So this is really about the protocols. Many persons did not understand, Mr. Speaker, and perhaps we did not do a good job of explaining it to persons. This thing called an incubation period for the virus. Most persons would think, if you come with a negative PCR test, what more do you need? You arrive with a negative PCR, you should be able to arrive at our port of entry and go about your business. Many persons didn't understand that. Maybe some persons understood and was promoting misinformation, or they were promoting the angst among the community for their own selfish benefit. And I'm sorry to say that. There are persons in our community who was exploiting this whole issue. Exploiting it because they see opportunities politically. I'm sorry to say it. And I'm sorry that this is the case. There might be some persons out there in the community who might actually feel bad if it goes well. Just because, sad to say, it'll make the government look bad. We have to get beyond that with COVID-19. I spoke about this already. Now is the time for unity, for coming together. Like in certain countries when they're at war, they say when you're at war, we don't have opposition or government. Everybody has to come together because we're fighting for the good of the nation. But unfortunately, we have persons out there. Look at them. They don't care about the community. They don't want your business to thrive. They want to see you fail. They only care about health. But what's going to happen when the economy dies? It's unfortunate. And some of those persons out there, I believe, were promoting misinformation and misunderstanding. They should have told the persons, they say, look at St. Lucia. I want St. Lucia to do well. And I understand the reason why they took the measures that they took. But we should be able to learn from St. Lucia's mistakes and from other countries' mistakes. They're my brothers and sisters. But they will tell you themselves, they have to revisit some things as well. There was a video where the Prime Minister of Barbados was speaking, Mia Mottley. And she spoke eloquently about why we need additional tests to that test that you walk with, that negative PCR test. And it's for the very same reason that I'm speaking now. There is something called an incubation period. What does this mean? It means that you can test negative for the virus that causes COVID-19 and you still have COVID-19. But the viral load is not large enough to be detected by a test. And it will take you at least 4 to 5 days to be able to pick it up on a test. So you had some countries who are letting in persons just with a negative PCR test. And then you find that this person ends up testing positive, and by that time they would have spread the virus throughout the society. Many persons. In fact, Prime Minister Mia Mottley, I can't remember the percentage of persons she said, but she actually told you the percentage of persons who test positive after the second test. Meaning, they came in with a negative PCR, but eventually tested positive after about 4 to 5 days. This means we have to remain diligent. The one PCR test coming in is not enough. And in fact, truth be told, if we're going to be honest with our people, if we wanted 100% certainty that the persons do not have COVID-19, we would have had to have another test after. But we understand that we have to be able to take some level of risk and mitigate that risk with things like this app, this bracelet, which means if we have a challenge, we can quickly contact trace. With things like quarantine, when persons come in here, they cannot just roam freely, even after the 4-day test. That's why we have this app, this bracelet, to ensure that we are able to track persons quickly. But we have to be able to take the measures as well. The mask wearing, the washing of hands, the keeping the 6 feet distance. We have to be disciplined. And because we are responsible government, we're not just going to encourage persons, because we know human nature. It's not what's expected, it's what about what's inspected. We understand human nature. Sometimes if you don't have penalties, persons don't take it seriously. So we have measures here enacted in law, and we have penalties for not following what it is we are supposed to do. So, Mr. Speaker, I promised I wouldn't debate for a very long time. But I just wanted to put what we're doing here in context. And I hope now that everyone gets behind this process that we're engaging in now. Everybody gets behind the testing which is required. Mr. Speaker, I watch sports. They have sports league that they're running. Some of these sports leagues, Mr. Speaker, they test people every single day who are participating in their leagues. They test them every day. That's what they had to do to be able to have the league, and the NBA perhaps was the most successful example. They had a NBA bubble. We are bubble down here in the Virgin Islands. They had an NBA bubble, and they tested persons every single day. Mr. Speaker, let us not discourage persons from testing. Testing is important. We had a 14-day quarantine period. We take it down to 4. How can you take something down from 14 to 4 without taking some measures to mitigate risk? The measures to mitigate risk means additional testing. Let's all get behind the testing. Let's all get behind the quarantine period. Do not expect, the tourists want to enjoy their holiday. Do not expect tourists to just walk in here and be able to interact with our people. It is not safe. Let's all get behind the quarantine. Let's all get behind the mask wearing. They say the mask stifling people. Well, you go 6 feet away from other persons and you take a deep breath. People have smoke and pollution all throughout the community for years. You put on a mask, now all of a sudden you're close to death. Put on the mask, let's get behind it. Hand washing. You don't have to complain to wash your hands. It's sanitary. Even before COVID-19, it's sanitary to wash your hands. Let's get behind the measures, Mr. Speaker. And I'm going to just emphasize again before I close. Let's all come together. This is one of the greatest challenges our society has faced in our history. We had the hurricanes in 2017, and let me just say thank God. Thank the Most High God that we were able to get through this hurricane season thus far. Hurricane season, I believe, ends in a few days. I give thanks to God that with all that we are coping with, we did not have to cope with a hurricane. We should all be grateful and thankful. But this is one of the most challenging periods we've ever had in our history, following those hurricanes and now with COVID-19. And Mr. Speaker, as I close, I'll just tell persons about an experience I had on Harvest Sunday in Langlook. This message that I listened to at Harvest Sunday at Langlook was deeply moving to me. Reverend Keith Lewis preached a master sermon. But the very basis of the sermon was, we need to adopt a spirit of thanksgiving. We complain too much. It's not that we do not have problems in our society. It's not that not things that can't be improved. But my God, can you not look at Nicaragua and Honduras after they were flooded and say, Lord, give thanks. Okay, a little rocks drop down in the ground on the road. We'll get that cleaned up. Can you not give thanks? When you look at around the world, persons suffering and dying from COVID-19. Mr. Speaker, we've had Virgin Islanders who live abroad who have passed away from COVID-19. We've had persons who we know and love lost family members. Can we not look at our society and say, thank God we have the financial services, that's providing us with some revenue. Thank God that not one government worker was laid off. Can you not look at your situation and find something to give thanks for? Mr. Speaker, yes, we have problems, but we have a whole lot to give thanks for here in the Virgin Islands, and that includes the fact that we don't have any active confirmed COVID-19 cases. And as we move forward into this December opening, Mr. Speaker, I pledge my support, I pledge my listening ear. I'm going to work hard to ensure that we remain safe here in these Virgin Islands, along with this team under the leadership of Honorable Andrew Ford. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity to debate, and I certainly give this amendment my full support. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister, for your contributions. Floor remains open, honorable members, as we debate the COVID-19 Control and Suppression Miscellaneous Provision Amendment Number 2, Act 2020. I have observed no one else wishing to participate in the floor debate. Therefore, I recognize the Premier and Minister of Finance and Member for the 1st District, the Honorable Andrew A. Foy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's almost easy to rise to my feet in this honorable House and state clearly that I do concur with all the words and the facts that have been brought out by the previous two speakers. And I do concur, I do agree, Mr. Speaker, with every word that they have said. And Mr. Speaker, I want to state that it's indeed a challenge with the reopening. And Mr. Speaker, with the challenges of the reopening, it is not unique to us alone. Because, Mr. Speaker, when I listen to some of the views being expressed by persons who don't agree with some of the measures taken by this government over the past 8 months, I would say, you realize that it's their democratic right to do so. But, Mr. Speaker, we were one of the first territories who turned back the cruise ship out of concern, and we took a lot of flack for that as a government. As a matter of fact, in some quarters, they stated that this is the most unpopular government in the history of the BVI for making those kind of decisions, among other measures that we had to take to ensure the safety of our people. I want to stick a pin right there in the cruise ship one, Mr. Speaker, in that the questions must be asked, Mr. Speaker, in that what happened if we did not take such proactive measures with the cruise ship not being able to dock, and we did say let it dock, and there were some cases. And the same taxi operators who pick them up, give them the tour, and afterward, Mr. Speaker, as we all know what happens, then they would have gone at that time and transport students from the different schools home. And Mr. Speaker, we would know, based on our territory, the number of students that are being transported home. Mr. Speaker, given that those guests on the cruise ship turned out, Mr. Speaker, to have been diagnosed by some since then as being positive, one would never know, because it didn't happen because of proactive measures. And we understand the cries of the taxi operators. We have put measures, stimulus in place to try to help. But we all know all around the world, no matter what country it is, no matter how strong their government is, no matter how much money they think they have, COVID-19 has put all of us in uncharted waters, especially financially and health-wise. And Mr. Speaker, those proactive measures that we made, and we were one of the first country, if not the first, who encouraged business people that no mask, no service. It was even mocked by some. And I've seen it, Mr. Speaker, hit worldwide. As a matter of fact, I have a very good friend who has a senator in one of the states in America, and he said he tuned in and he heard it, and they used it in America. And I said, wow. And that was a few months ago they told me that. Mr. Speaker, we also put measures in place in terms of lockdown to contain the spread of the virus. And Mr. Speaker, we know that it's a very difficult time for what we have gone through. And with that, Mr. Speaker, we know the challenges financially. And I want to state, Mr. Speaker, that this territory spent a lot of its own taxpayers' money to make sure that we protected lives, all lives. And Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Health, who received the majority of the funding, have and will continue and will account for every dime. And Mr. Speaker, this has gone into test kits, PPEs, retrofitting hospitals of COVID-19, the old people's hospitals of COVID-19 center. All that when we were doing, Mr. Speaker, we heard that this is not necessary. Now the whole world now, Mr. Speaker, are moving towards getting areas designated as COVID-19 areas because of the number of persons. We went further, Mr. Speaker, and went to get the medical officials from Cuba, 22 of them, and extending them. And might I add that they have complemented the staff, the good medical staff that's here in the BVI in tremendous ways. They have learned from each other, and together they have saved some lives in this territory that prior to them being together, those lives might have been lost. Being proactive. And yes, Mr. Speaker, when we started after spending over $12 million in change and moving, we were able to get help from other persons with ventilators, and eventually, Mr. Speaker, we were able to get some assistance from the United Kingdom, which we thank them dearly for. But the truth of the matter is, those came long after we had started this fight against COVID-19. So had we not been proactive and pushed forward, and the Lord said in His word, He helped those who helped themselves so that we could be able to sustain and maintain our livelihoods and our lives until more help comes. We, Mr. Speaker, need to put on record, put together a team named the Health Emergency Operating Center, or Command. And it is parallel to the National Emergency Operating Center team. The National Emergency Operating Center team comes into place when there's hurricanes. And we were told by some that that has to be the entity to be used during COVID-19. And we said, no, COVID-19 is not a disaster, it's a pandemic. Hence, we saw our forefathers in this House did legislation from up to as far back as 1977, and we were able to rely on the Public Health Act of 1977, a legislation done in 1977 that gave the people of the Virgin Islands the authority to govern themselves during a pandemic. Why is that important, Mr. Speaker? Had that legislation not been put in place during COVID-19, we as a people would have not been in charge of our destiny during this pandemic, because there were movements on foot to make sure that it was not so. And this government had to use those legislation along with the Quarantine Act and also the Infectious Disease Act to be able to show that the law says that the Minister of Health is in charge of pandemics. And had we listened to those who were giving us the rhetoric that we cannot get it done on our own and we need to move in this direction that they're suggesting, and that they would have had to go through the entity that was already proven, we would not be the captains of our fate going through COVID-19. So when I stand anytime and people tell me that I'm trying to orchestrate plots, I'm not orchestrating. I'm not dealing with people off of feelings. I look at people's history and I see how they modernize their actions and come forward to know that what was is, and what is was, and what was will be again. I didn't say that, the Bible said it. And I also know that history never repeats itself. People repeat history. And the reason people repeat history is because they do not research and learn from what happened before. Case in point. Most of the BVI are Christians. And I can't tell anyone the state of their faith. But if you believe in the Word of God when you read it, the first sign of trouble shouldn't get you tempest-tossed with every wind that blows. But most of us do. Yet we read the book and we criticize Moses. He should have known this. Why did he smite the rock? It's easy to see these things with 20/20 hindsight. Why did Samson throw down the wall just this morning? Said the leader opposition, we were talking about Samson. And he knew that the Lord said him, the Lord was with him. It was easy for persons to criticize Samson. A lot of men lost their throne, how Samson lose his in modern day time. Had they read the book and believed in it, it wouldn't have happened. And they look at Jonah, a man of God, and Jonah ran and ran away. And he saw what God did before. Why did he do that? It's easy to criticize persons when you read the Bible and read anything and say, they should have known this, because you get to read the beginning, the middle, and the end. So you can now become the evaluator and the critic. But when you live in these things, Mr. Speaker, it's not a simple thing. And you have to believe in a principle. The principle we believe in is all people. COVID-19, we are now 0 positive confirmed cases. I can't say that it isn't out there somewhere. Nobody could ever say that. But in terms of confirmed positive cases, we have none. We have our good brothers and sisters there in St. Vincent. Every now and again they test us. They test us the first time, turned out it was negative. They test us the second time, turned out it was negative. And by God, they like to play softball like Honorable Neville Smith. They test us a third time. Well, we got so trained from the first two tests that what we did this last time is we rushed for everybody that was wrong the process and test them again. We didn't make no big announcements. We just test them and test them again. Everyone negative. Test them again, negative. Then when we hear we, bam, bam, they said to test them again, and now the person in St. Vincent negative. So I really don't know what to believe when I hear something come out from there. This one was the most amazing one, and don't get me wrong, Gonzalez is my good friend. But I mean, we get tested. And this one actually went 2 places before they reached to St. Vincent, and actually was stopover in one, and it's still, when they got deemed to be positive, it was still the BVI. Forget them other 2 places, that didn't matter. It had to be the BVI, that's where they started. That's amazing. But nevertheless, that's not going to break up St. Vincent and our relationship. It just shows the strength of our system. And I give a lot of credit to the Health Emergency Operating Team. They had to answer so much questions inside that I know sometimes I went home grumbling because we ourselves wanted to be sure. But when it was done now, we can rest assured that we have 2 entities now that exist in the territory. In case of a disaster, we now have the National Emergency Operating Center. And if a pandemic like we're going through, we have the Health Emergency Operating Command or Center. And that is only because we believed in our people. With our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Potter, who stayed steadfast in purpose and diligent in actions. And the PS and her team, and her deputy PS, and now the acting PS, and the 2 deputy PSs in health, and PS in Premier's office, and we could go down the whole line, stayed steady with the minister. We were one of the first territories in the Caribbean who invested in a lab, because if people would stretch their memories just a few months ago when we started by testing persons, and then having those tests go down to Trinidad, to CARFA, and having to wait like you used to wait when you were going to school in the younger, well, I'm the age just when the internet and technology was coming on stream. So I still have a little experience of waiting in college till your grade gets stick up so you could see if you had passed. Now that is emailed to you. But what I'm saying is that we were waiting for CARFA with bated breaths, waiting, hoping to see. We sent down 52. I wonder how many of them coming out of CARFA. And we waited for days, and sometimes during the wee hours of the morning, when I do email the results before they come back officially, and the Minister of Health would email me and say, we got the results, Premier. He would usually wake me up around 5 o'clock. I don't know when he got the email, but it was always be 5. And whenever I see the phone call ring around 5, I get concerned, especially if I see his name, and he would say, Premier, we got the results in 2 positive, or we got the results in 5 positive. Premier, this one isn't good. This one is good. And then he would tell me, get some rest, and later on we'll deal with it, as if you could sleep again when you don't hear that you have positive tested persons in your territory, because we take these things very seriously. But we invested in a lab, retrofitted the lab, got the test kits long before we got any assistance from anyone. And we got it certified by CARFA, thanks to the medical team, all the people in the Dr. Orlando Smith Hospital, and even Dr. George's when it is help. You can't forget these people. And we now can tell you in a few hours with a PCR test if this person is positive or negative. That's a country advancing. And with accuracy that even when we are tested by our fellow OECS brother in St. Vincent, that we can stand and say, we stand firm with our systems that it is working. We stand firm with our tests, that our tests are valid. And that has proven so all the time. And Mr. Speaker, as we look and we progress through COVID-19, there are a lot of measures that were put in place. Sometimes it pains my heart to mention some of them. And we put them in place one by one. And I always tell persons it's better to be 6 feet apart than to be 6 feet under. And it's better to wear a mask than to be referred to in the past. Mr. Speaker, all the measures that need to be put in, we put them in. Even when we were hearing they were unpopular, we had to close bars, Mr. Speaker, because we realized that whether persons wanted to hear it or not, it was one of the areas where not all bars, but a good bit of them, they were not practicing the social distancing. And they weren't practicing anything safe at all. So to save people for themselves, we had to do a lot of unpopular things. Mr. Speaker, we did the curfews. We limited gatherings. And Mr. Speaker, we did a lot of things that politically did not seem correct. But livelihood and life-wise, they were. So we take full blame for when it seemed like it was going wrong. But we share with everyone today, praise be to God, you could knock, that we have 0 confirmed positive cases in the territory, thanks be to God. I don't think that we hear it now. We're about almost 40 days with 0 confirmed positive cases. That is not to brag. That is to tell God thanks. Bigger country than ours. Smaller country than ours. Same size country as ours. We're not experiencing what we were experiencing now or handling it, how we are handling it now. And you should always take advice, but I was always marveled when those who aren't handling it well telling us that they're going to guide us through how to handle it. I was always marveled by that. And Mr. Speaker, when you look and see what the BVI has done and still is doing, because we're not out of the woods yet, COVID-19 is going to be around for quite a long time, sad to say, until the vaccine comes. And we still have to make sure with this vaccine that we respect people's rights with it. Because there are persons who, because of religious beliefs, they don't want to take the vaccine, or their religion doesn't allow it. But there are also persons who want to make sure that this vaccine is working. We run from these things, but everyone you meet just about, or persons on the side, they tell you, don't let them experiment on us with these vaccines. And then when you're finished, you hear this and you hear that, and all people are quote unquote guinea pigs. They're concerned, and rightfully so. Anything new brings concern, but anything new that has to go into your body going to bring a lot of concern. Person's going to be overcautious, and they have every right to be so. So we have to make sure that we exercise with abundance of caution. Abundance of caution. And Mr. Speaker, when we look now, let's take a look at some of the larger countries. Some of them are the ones who are trying to impose their will on us, but pretending not to. They now are telling persons some of the very things, those and others, that we were saying back then. I never thought I would see the day when I meet persons who tell me that they are customer traveling, and I know them well, that they have no desire to leave here right now. And Mr. Speaker, I look at America. Sometimes I wonder if persons have the television to look at America, look at the UK, look at Europe, look at all those places, and tell me what you're seeing when you watch the television. In America, 260,000 persons now have died from COVID-19. The last time I watched, it was over 12 million persons. As a member from the thought that said 12 million persons infected with COVID-19. Hospitals are filled. And that is for COVID. So you have to call a heart attack now common because you can't get in even if you have that. Last night, a very good friend of mine called me from Trinidad and they said that the former government years ago built a hospital and was never open. They had to open it and just make it a COVID-19 center. And they said that yesterday alone, it was either 50-something or 60-something cases again were reported just yesterday alone. You look at other islands, and it's not to rally in any of their downfall, but it's a reality. Persons are scared, and none of us have the playbook for this. We have to learn from each other. And then you look at America now, and you're hearing that the bars are being ordered to shut at 10 o'clock. I never thought I would have seen that in America. But we were ridiculed when we said these things have to happen here. And you're seeing them saying that some states have mandated that there'll be no gathering of a certain size. These are things that we already put in here. Just watch the television or Google, get your information. So when I analyze it and I look back at it, I thank God for all our people that we sent to school that came back and were able to help guide us, and for the decisions the government made, and for all the work that House of Assembly came and passed. We're in this together. Now we're moving towards the reopening. And I get a lot of WhatsApp and calls about this reopening. Yes. So when they look and see in terms of being accurate, because I want to make sure I'm accurate in terms of the 40 days without a case, I just want to make sure that we're accurate with it. So when it's quoting, when I said that, I mean it was it was 43 days since the last active case was recorded and 32 days since the last person has recovered. So I just want to make sure it's accurate for the record. And Mr. Speaker, now we come to the reopening. We have to have laws in place to make sure that persons who come from areas where they didn't respect the measures put in place, that when they land here, they respect them. I have received a lot of concerns for, are you sure we should open on the 1st? Because everywhere around us is spiking to new and new records. And yes, as leader of this territory, it's not an easy call. But we are making sure, as much as is humanly possible, that all the measures are put in place and all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted. Because we realize we have to reopen sometime. And like everyone else that reopened, we have to try something and make sure it's well calculated. A well calculated risk and to allow for the risk, as Dr. Potter rightfully says, to measure the amount of risk that we can take and that we can manage. And that is well said by the doc. And the Attorney General now, and the one in the past, but especially the one now being that we reopen, would know that every single day God said, I ask now, do you show our laws strong enough so that when persons come to test them, and we have to enforce them that they're up to par? And she said, well, rightfully, like a true lawyer walks the salt would say, she said anything could be tested. But we are resolute that it will stand the test of time. You never know when you get in a courthouse. But We will stand the test of time. Because we want to put measures in place that if in the eventuality that there's a case, that it was in a managed environment so that contact tracing would not be an issue and it would be no large contact tracing need to be done because they would have been in a bubble area, so to speak, so that when they're tested, it's only who are in that bubble area with them in terms of their family will be the ones who we will have to contain, or so we thought. Because in another Caribbean country, we are seeing where after the 4th and 5th day, they were tested positive. I'm not sure if they tested when they came in or if they had to have a negative test upon arrival and tested negative when they arrived. I'm not sure about that. But on the 5th day, they were tested positive, tested and found to be positive. And there were some situations where they decided that they want to leave now and don't want to be quarantined. And the state was challenged with that and some other areas. I don't want us to be in that boat. Because one or two areas, they found the laws of the country to be weak. And that's why we came here today, to make sure that we tighten up these laws. And yes, I know persons want to make money. And I am not against that. I don't have a negative bone in my body for persons who want to make money the legal way through the tourism industry. It's understandable. Because there's a section of our country that's hurting still. And we have to address that through the measures we're putting in on the first. But I want them to know that we cannot have persons visiting when they come to your hotels or on your boats or whatever and come with the mindset that they come into a small island state and they can do what they want because this is a banana republic. It will not be accepted. And I'm asking persons not to let your guests dictate what is going to be done with the health protocols. They are not COVID-19 specialists. They are not doctors. And it will be unfair for us to ask the people of the Virgin Islands to adhere, and they adhered to all the measures we put in, the majority of persons. And I commend the people of the Virgin Islands over the last few months to have a few people come and try to broke the rules and dictate the pace for us and create cases where we would have to be looking about whether to shut down or not. And that is what the Deputy Premier rightfully quoted, that I continue to say through this whole pandemic: half a loaf is better than no loaf at all. So if we can pace ourselves to make sure that we don't let persons carry us to the point, stop them, I'll put it that way, from doing that, then we would be saying to our wife, yes, I want you to live. We'll be saying to our husband, yes, I want you to live. We'll be saying to our mothers, yes, we want you to live. We'll be saying to our grandparents, yes, we want you to live. We'll be saying to our children, yes, I want you to live. I was to a BBI finance function last night, and you know, we had the mask, and sometimes we took them off and thing, and there was a joke while we were mingling, and they said, well, tonight is the last, these few days is the last before we have to wear masks all the time, even when we're speaking up, down, across, because we're opening. And people laugh, but I understand what they're saying, because the fear is there. And I'm appealing to our fine business people not to allow what I've seen happen in some other parts of the world near to us and far, where for the want of $1, we allow the guests to do what they want to do and ignore the protocols and put the staff, and as a result their children, and as a result their spouse, as a result their in-laws and their grandparents and mothers in danger. So we would have made $15,000 for the day as an example. But when we shut down, we lost $150,000 because we did not make sure that we adhere to all the protocols. I don't mind doing what is needed to be done to keep the people safe. Most of it is not politically correct. As a matter of fact, in the early past, if there were election, this government would have been in trouble because persons didn't believe in most of the measures. But I lived to hear a lot of them come back and say, thank God you made those decisions. Thank God your government stuck together and we made them together. There's a lot of nights of meeting and discussing. And even today when we're finished here, we have some discussions to be had to make sure certain areas outside of the law path is tightened up. Because we have cabinet this week, and I have announced that our cabinet is very serious because we have some other areas to pass. Because this reopening is on my mind, and it's on all of our minds. Because we know that we are going to increase the risk once we open. But that risk has to be managed. And it is being managed to the best of our ability. And Mr. Speaker, I know there are those who have been pushing us to say all of this is not necessary. Go ahead and open. Too much rules, too much regulations. And I always tell everyone that continue to try to give their input, because you have to respect it as a democracy. But I told them we have to make the most calculated decision based on the science, not the emotions. And when we make those decisions, we have to be able to live with them or die in them. Because COVID-19 doesn't respect whether you're the premier, the leader of the opposition, the member for the 8th, the member for the 9th, the member for the 7th. It doesn't respect who we are. COVID-19 doesn't discriminate. That's why I tell everyone from the UK down to some of the funding in CARICOM and whatever, because they're giving us funding for COVID based on your GDP, and I tell them, no, not this time. We have to reanalyze those financial protocols because COVID didn't skip over us because of our GDP. And COVID didn't skip over us because we're the Virgin Islands. COVID did not skip anyone. Therefore, funding for COVID should not skip anyone. Because the thinking pre-COVID-19 cannot be the same thinking and policies and rules and laws and financial policies as in COVID-19, post-COVID-19. Anyone who is doing that still does not understand the length and breadth of COVID-19, nor do we know the length and breadth of COVID-19. So banks cannot operate the same. Financial institutions of all sorts cannot operate the same. Government's policies have to adjust. And we cannot hold persons to the same standard as pre-COVID-19, especially in the financial and other areas. And I thank my colleagues across the aisle, because even when they challenged us, they did it in a spirit of looking out for the BVI. Because I know that we're in this together, and I don't say it loosely. And I want us to know that it is a frightening time. As a leader of the territory, some people said, never say that. It is a frightening time. But we're only human. But at the same time, it's a time to increase our faith and our resilience as a people, to make sure that we pay attention to every single detail. I've been under pressure as a leader of the territory by persons who have threatened me to take their investments out of here if I didn't let them do what they wanted to do business-wise because of certain health protocols. I want to say publicly to those persons here that anytime you decide to take your investments from the BVI, because you're against some of the health protocols. It means to me that you only here for what you can get. And it means to me that you don't care about the people, nor your staff, nor our safety. Because we didn't put them in to try to destroy your business. We put them in to try to make sure that you're alive so that we can make sure that we can walk through COVID-19, the post-COVID-19 era, and get back on our feet stronger than ever. And whether you are rich or money challenged, because I don't like to call people poor, COVID-19 also does not discriminate. So they cannot have special health protocols for the rich and a separate special health protocols for the financially challenged. It is the same across the board. And once we change our thinking in this COVID-19 era, and we change our business models, and we change our policies in government, because we have changed a lot of them, Mr. Speaker, with a lot more to come, only then will we start to understand how to live and walk through the new regular, being COVID-19. And Mr. Speaker, having said that, we want to make sure that when it's all said and done, as the Deputy Premier, Dr. Whitney rightfully said, that it will, when the history is written, it will be written that we handled this pandemic well. It will be written that the HEOC was formed in the right time. But it will also be a reference point for us to stop letting people think, make us believe that we cannot chart our way forward and be our own captains of our ship. Whenever I say that, persons get on the television, the radio, they say the Premier is trying to carry us towards independence and the Premier is trying to run this, and I just smile, because you cannot look at the future without saying that at some time the inevitable will come. And every action that we do now must reflect that we can police ourselves. Because the truth of the matter is the BVI has been policing itself and looking out for itself for years. And when I see some of what I'm seeing coming on stream, and I've seen it more and more, it reminds me of a story a lady told me 3 days ago, where she said that one time she was told about this gentleman who got a child by this lady, and he got in an accident a year after the child born. A very rich family. And the lady told me, at least based on her story, that they were so rich they kept him on the machine in a coma for 45 years. I don't know if this is true, but this is what she told me, the story. But what I was intrigued by with the story was not whether it was 45 years or not. It was when she further stated that after 45 years he woke up. And in his mind, the child was still a year. And when he saw the gentleman come to him, he started to tell him about this beautiful son he had that's a year, and now that he's out of the coma, he wants to see him. No one told him how long he was in the coma, so he didn't even know that. So the nurses and things said, "This is your son. He's now 46 years old." And he was in disbelief. But as time passed, he kept dealing with the son like the 1 year old that he remembered. And he did not adjust till nearly time of his death, which was years later, that his son was not the 1 year old that he left due to the coma, but he was now 46 years old and had his doctorate and was fending for himself and had his own family. That story intrigued me. I get thinking, and I recognize that that story can be parallel to a lot of things that is happening in the world today with bigger countries and smaller countries. They leave you there to die as a bird sanctuary, and now they come back with the greatest mindset that they love you and they come to help you grow up. But we all know till we don't get children and grandchildren, so trying to treat us like we are the 1-year-old when we don't grow up and on the big stage means that you either didn't come out of the coma that you're in or you're willful. Some people do it with PR strategy, so that even some of the family members, I guess, would or around us would believe that it isn't, so they really genuinely come to help us along the way. But I remember in primary school doing the story of the rolling dumb bread. And I'll tell it in here one of these days again. And then the dumpling and dumb bread, when it was rolling and so much people asked it to stop, you're going to take care of them. That time they were trying to eat it. But this is what our people have shown in COVID-19, that we have matured to the point where we can take a country in the middle of a health pandemic and get it going. And only God has helped us do it. Whether people believe in God or not, God has helped this territory so tremendously. That's why I was glad when Honorable Maduro Keynes said on the first of the year, and matched with my spirit when she said it at the end of 2019, let's dedicate the first of the year to God. People have it as a joke. It's a very serious thing. Because look how the Lord blessed this territory. That in the midst of COVID-19, he knew that we could not handle another Irma and Maria. And he didn't give it to us. Could you imagine an Irma and Maria on top of COVID-19? So if you think we have it bad now, just think and envision what else could have hit us. And I put it to the territory, and I put it to the world, and I put it to everyone listening, that no other territory, no other place in the world has fared as much as this territory has fared in the last few years. 2 Category 5 hurricanes in less than a week. Floods. And then on top of it now comes COVID-19. Yet the resilience of our people, the resilience of our systems is admirable. But we allow persons only to let us see the negative parts. But when you compare now COVID-19, allow us to compare ourselves as a territory with the rest of the world, because everyone is on the news now. And when you see what we're doing compared to the world, we have to say thank God that he has kept his hand on us and that we didn't walk away from him under his cover. And thank God that we continue to educate our people, that now our people of the Virgin Islands, whether born here or naturalized or whatever the case may be, they help build it, has come together to save a territory with God's help during the greatest pandemic to hit the world. Mr. Speaker, we need to put those things into perspective. So yes, we understand and know and sympathetic, and will continue to work with persons struggling. And I appeal to persons in government departments and I appeal to persons in the private sector, the banks and everyone. I'm appealing to you. I'm not dictating or instructing. I'm appealing to please reassess your policies, reassess your laws and your regulations, reassess them so that they can reflect the reality on the ground with COVID-19. And do not use those policies and those regulations and those laws to govern persons in the same way as pre-COVID-19. We'll be doing the people an injustice, and we'll be doing ourselves an injustice. So, Mr. Speaker, now that we have pilot ourselves with God's help to this reopening, I want to thank the AG's office for all the work she and her fine team has done. I do thank you, Madam Lady, and all the other ladies in the chambers. There's no male there. Okay. One, okay, one. Yes, that's true, only one left. But nevertheless, they worked hard and we thank them. And in the committee stage, I'll be double checking because we want to make sure that everything is airtight. And even in the policies and the regulations that we're going into cabinet this week with, there's a lot of things that we have to get narrowed down to make sure that persons understand that all of us have to be singing the same song in the same key on the same song sheet in the same timing with this one. We cannot have business owners interpreting the policies and the protocols one way, and then another set of the business owners interpreting them another way, and the guests doing different things, and the guests being allowed to get away with certain things. We cannot have it. Because when all of this is said and done, if it goes bad, there's nobody in this house that's going to get the brunt of the storm more than the Premier. So since the Premier get the brunt of the storm, God forbid that it comes, let the Premier double check everything too. I'm hearing persons trying to push me that they have persons coming on boats and they want them to go here and allow them to go there. They can't spend 4 days on the boat alone. Swim on the boat. Jump in the sea, swim around the boat. If you have a bubble area, make sure it doesn't involve getting in contact with anybody. And if we ain't sure about that, let's reassess it. I cannot put the majority of the people's lives in the Virgin Islands at risk for a few lawless people or some persons that just want to make the money and still don't be fair to the employees. I will not do it. I don't intend to go down West End and sit down, but before I go West End and sit down, before I let people force or bully me into doing anything that I'm not going to put the people of the Virgin Islands' lives in jeopardy, and there's been a lot of persons coming. I call them threats, trying to bully me to get them to do what they want and telling me different things from high and low quarters, or high and quarters not so high. And I tell them I love you, but I can't do it because I love my people and my country more. And some of them leave very angry. Some have formed groups to come to pressure, to put me in directions that I know is not best for the people with our health. And the one area I want us to remember, we cannot do business the same. Look at some innovative businesses that have popped up the hiking trail. Some of the glass bottom boats that go with a certain number of persons. Some persons have changed their structure of how they do business. Last night at BVI Finance, I met some more that are doing certain innovative things. More of our people going into the farming and the fishing and making sure they set up farming markets themselves and fishing depots. We can come up with innovative things in the middle of COVID-19. In every disaster, there's an opportunity. And don't tell me there's none. COVID-19 came, the lab started to make vaccine. You think they'll give it away for free? COVID-19 came, different products come on stream that tell you that if they spray it on the surface, it kills the coronavirus, and it remains on the surface for up to 2 weeks. That any virus hits it again, it dies. Through every disaster comes an opportunity. So we cannot sit and just think on all that's going wrong. We have to sit and say, well, all right, how do I move to the next level while I'm living and walking in the new regular of COVID-19? Government has to do the same. We met a policy where you couldn't use petty contracts or split up contracts anymore. But we passed an addendum to the law, to the Public Finance Management Act, that allows us to manage the projects in an accountable manner and allow persons to register contractors with the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Transportation for whatever project is being done during a pandemic, once it's ongoing and catastrophic event. And the project will go to cabinet, be passed, and then you go on the list. And Mr. Speaker, the registrars, contractors, once they work, they have to do certain training after that job to move to the next level. There are three tiers of levels for contractors until they become from the little contractor, medium, into the big. We have to become innovative with that. That's the same methodology that we're using with the Eastern Langlook project. In the middle of the pandemic, you have to change your policies to adapt to the reality on the ground. Now we can use the petty contracts without Treasury stopping saying that it's contract splitting. Now we can do certain things that would not have been allowed before because of how the law was structured, but because now we're in a pandemic and we did addendum to the law to allow it to happen, we have allowed our people now to benefit when government are doing any projects that will require more than one contractor to be involved. And the project management section at the highest level to ensure that it gets done with a value for money and of a good quality too. Because there are those who feel that all people can do nothing right and all we can amount to are criminals and thieves. There are those among us who feel that they just don't tell us. I had a lot of meeting with some of them. And they feel that's all we could do. That's why when I said, and I mean it genuinely, that I praise our systems for the greatest drug bust. Some saying that I am out there condoning wrong and condoning this and condoning the other, not agreeing that we don't have corruption. I just smile. Because if they played back, they won't hear that I say any of that at all. I am saying that I praise our systems, that our systems were working to make the bus, and that our systems are working that we can get certain things done. So whatever it calls for in this COVID-19 era and beyond, to strengthen our systems, we have to do it. Because our people have shown that we can police ourselves. Everywhere you go, they're going to be good and bad. Everywhere you go, they're going to be good and bad. But it's up to the system to be strong enough to weed out the bad. And the bad is always a few numbers, a small portion. No, I'm sorry if you feel that way. COVID-19 related. And with that, this shows all of this happening in the COVID-19 era. So, Mr. Speaker, I thank everyone for allowing us today to come with this emergency suppression amendment number 2, Act 2020. And as we sit down with it, clause by clause, as a matter of fact, word by word, let us make sure that we don't miss an area that will leave us vulnerable for persons who may come and want to test our laws, or test our systems, or test our policies, or test our measures put in place for their own selfish good. Or those that are here who would want to test them or adjust them so they could make an extra dollar. So, Mr. Speaker, we have to make sure that everyone understands loud and clear that those things will not be accepted in the British Virgin Islands. We have come too far to let a few loose-minded persons now put us in jeopardy. So with those few words, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you, and this Suppression, Control and Suppression Miscellaneous Provisions Amendment Act has my support, and I thank the Minister of Health for his thoughtfulness with it, and his staff. I thank you.
I thank the Premier for his contributions to the debate. Having seen no one else wishing to debate, I therefore call upon the sponsor of the bill to wrap up.
Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to conclude this portion. I thought we had another at least 30 minutes because I know that silence gives consent, I would have thought that the members opposite would have taken this opportunity to voice their specific approval on some of what is being done here today, as they are rightfully concerned on some of the measures, but those that they see favor, I think that the record would have appropriately reflect that they agree on these. But there is all who in favor say yes, and that will happen. But Mr. Speaker, before I close, we speak glowingly of the HEOC. The Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Potter, will join us later as we go through this amendment clause by clause, and indeed, as there are no written text to this to follow, guidelines to follow, there are other measures that pertains to this broad title that will have to be looked at, agreed, and introduced by members. So we invite him to do that. We also have our acting permanent secretary. Yesterday evening I told her, well, you have to go to bat right away and have your maiden contribution in the House of Assembly in terms of the draft notes. I called her about 8 o'clock this morning. I said, where are the notes? She said, well, I thought you would have been up at 5. Because the premier's always saying, you're up at 5, so I sent it at 3. So she had it. So I'd like to thank her for fitting in so seamlessly that it, I can't tell one from the other in terms of, the actual preparedness and the level of details. And of course, this is a transitional period, and we have our new Attorney General. I called Brother Aziz the Attorney General for Health, and now we have seamless transition, and the Attorney General for Health continues with the new AG. She's up late, and there are other measures that she would have to bring into stead in getting all of these measures that we have. And I know that members welcome the attention that health get in this concern, because COVID-19 is reaping havoc throughout the world. So it is not by chance that we have to make sure that all of the laws, all of the measures, when you look at what the Director of Communications and the support we get from DDM and the support we get from the BVI Health Services Authority, it is a collaborative effort. Mr. Speaker, I am going to do something of which I would be chastised for later, but I just want to bring to the attention of the public that this is not a quote-unquote Minister of Health item. It is not a Premier's item. It is not any single member of cabinet, any single member of government of the House of Assembly. Because together with the Cabinet of the Virgin Islands, we have the House of Assembly, we have the Health Emergency Operating Committee, we have the BVI Health Services Authority, and all arms of that authority, be it community health, laboratory services, emergency wards, environmental division, and all of the social distancing task force and the measures taken, the Chief Medical Officer's office, the health department, the social distancing task force, the BVI Airports Authority, the BVI Ports Authority, the Joint Task Force of the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force, Customs, Immigration, the Attorney General's Chambers, the Social Development Department, the 9/11 Center, Solid Waste Department, and the entire civil service and the people of the Virgin Islands coming together, there are going to be names that I missed, but I was writing them down as I'm here, and they're going to be inadvertently left out. Like, for instance, GIS, like, for instance, all of the bodies that we have to call on from time to time. Right here, we had Mr. Leonard breaking down from where we were yesterday up until late, and then we come here and we write up under the clerk's desk, but had to set up, get ready for this seamless transition. CBN and Mr. Cox, all of this, so that we can save lives and save livelihoods. But what else can we do? Premier spoke of the innovative ways that people can transition their businesses. And when you look at the farming, agriculture plays a big part in this, because what we eat, how we exercise, the Complete Health Improvement Program, it is a program that some of our members have already invested in by giving the funds for person to become registered in it. I invite all members to look within their districts and the territorial to look at all the districts and see what support they can give in making sure that persons enroll in this Complete Health Improvement Program. Our comrade, Mr. Ijurenka, he will be the first to say, well, look, you must promote more of the Complete Health Improvement Program. And Ivy George, she is a champion of this program. She a gentle giant as it pertains for this CHIP program. Over in Jocelyn, it was being mixed up with a chip that is being talked about to track you. And I told them the only chip that we're going to enforce is a Complete Health Improvement Program. That is not a biological or a man-made chip that will go under your skin. Complete Health Improvement Program. It is braved. Sister Nadine has this, because vitamin D now is found to be one of the things that everybody's pushing. And there are a lot of our people, Mr. Penn up in the East, there are a lot of our people who has looked in terms of the natural ways that you can fight this virus. We have the sun, we have the sea. That is a benefit in terms of making this work. As the other parts of the world, which have a clear case of cold weather, we have issues because the flu season is here, COVID-19 is here, and it is reaping havoc already. So, Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank for the input that we've had so far, and when we go into committee, we would be able to look in how we can further enhance what we've had to look at and make this complete. We would have to return for other measures that we may have missed. But, Mr. Speaker, I thank you very much for the input.
I thank the Minister for his wrap-up of the bill. It has been moved and seconded that the bill shortly entitled COVID-19 Control and Suppression Miscellaneous Provision Amendment Number 2, Act 2020, be now read a second time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Therefore, I call upon the clerk to read the bill a second time.
This act may be cited as the COVID-19 Control and Suppression Miscellaneous Provisions Amendment Number 2, Act 2020.
Thank you. Pursuant to Standing Order 55-1 of the House of Assembly of the Virgin Islands, the I call upon the mover of the bill, the Minister for Health and Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the members for their input and the witnesses for their input during the committee stage. So, Mr. Speaker, I beg to report that the bill entitled COVID-19 Control and Suppression, Miscellaneous Provision, Amendment Number 2, Act 2020, has passed through committee without amendments. Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill entitled COVID-19 Control and Suppression, Miscellaneous Provision, Amendment Act 2020 be read a third time and passed.
Speaker, I rise to second that motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. It has been moved and seconded that the bill entitled COVID-19 Control and Suppression, Miscellaneous Provision Amendment Number 2, Act 2020 be now read a third time and pass. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. The motion is passed. Therefore, I call upon the clerk to read the bill for a third time.
This act may be cited as the COVID-19 Control and Suppression Miscellaneous Provisions, Amendment Number 2, Act 2020.
Thank you, honourable members. The bill has been passed without amendments. I call upon the Premier to move a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me see. Whereas it is provided under Standing Order 78.1 that there may be a select committee other than a sessional committee to be known as Special Select Committee, whereas it is also provided under Standing Order 78.1 that a Special Select Committee shall be appointed by order of the House of Assembly, which shall specify the terms of reference of the committee and shall consist of such or so many members as the House of Assembly may nominate. Whereas it is provided by Standing Order 78.2 of the Standing Orders that the quorum of a Special Select Committee shall be such as shall be specified in the order of the House. Whereas it is provided by Standing Order 79, subsection 1 of the Standing Orders, that every Select Committee shall so constitute as to ensure, so far as possible, that the balance of parties in the House is reflected in the committee. Whereas it is provided by Standing Order 79, subsection 3 of the Standing Orders, that except as is otherwise provided by the Standing Orders or by special direction of the House, a Select Committee may elect a chairman from among its members. And whereas the House of Assembly of the Virgin Islands seeks to constitute a Special Select Committee to implement a system for the use of technology to reduce the use of paper in the House of Assembly, and that the terms of reference of the committee, that the Committee A may add such resource person as it thinks fit for the purpose of enabling the function of the committee, and B, shall prepare reports to be tabled before the House of Assembly, and when required by the House. Now therefore be it resolved by the House of Assembly of the Virgin Islands, A, that a Special Select Committee be appointed to implement a system for the use of technology to reduce the use of paper in the House of Assembly. Be that the following shall be seven members, which are the honorable members, and all other being ex officio members, the Secretary and the Committee, and shall perform the functions of aforesaid. Honorable Julian Willock, Chairman. Honorable Malon A. Penn, Deputy Chair. Dr. the Honorable Natalia D. Whitney, Member. Honorable Sherry B. Castro, Member. Honorable Shereen D. Flax Charles, Member. Honorable Neville A. Smith, Member. Honorable Julian Fraser, Member. Ms. Sandra Ward, ex officio. Mrs. Annabelle Skilton Malone, ex officio. Ms. Phyllis Evans, ex officio. Ms. Gustin Industrious, ex officio. Mrs. June Smith Bramble secretary, and C, that 4 members of the committee shall constitute the quorum. Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I move this motion in an effort for us to have the House of Assembly to go paperless. It's time, as much as possible. We'll always need certain paper, but to make sure that we go paperless and to ensure, Mr. Speaker, that not only we go paperless, but it also advances the integrity and also advances the format in which the House operates into a more professional and a more modern manner. This, Mr. Speaker, is in tandem to when we did pass in this House that in case of any disaster or any hurricanes or pandemics and the House cannot meet physically, we did pass already in the standing orders that we can now meet electronically. So that was already passed by this Honorable House this year, which is another revolutionary way forward for the House. And this is important for the House of Assembly, Mr. Speaker, because this year is our 70th anniversary of the House of Assembly Legislative Council, now House of Assembly. And even back then, there was one time it was named House of Assembly. So there is a legal debate whether the number in which we have numbered the House of Assembly now is correct, given that there was a House of Assembly before when it was interchanged from Legislative Council. So that is in the history, in the archives of our history. So, Mr. Speaker, it shows that we continue to grow as a territory. And I thank the members on all sides of the aisle, because I know one thing that we do have in common and we are mutually aligned with is to ensure that we advance the way the House of Assembly performs, not only in legislation, but also in terms of technology and methodology, Mr. Speaker. So it is a good day to have this done. With that, Mr. Speaker, I know that we're going to get this done in record time. It is necessary. It's going to increase efficiency. It's going to also reduce, Mr. Speaker, having to walk around with a bundle of paper, Mr. Speaker, and have it at your fingertip that you can review. So it's a timely initiative, and one in which all the members are welcome. So, Mr. Speaker, I welcome this, and it's a good time now to move in this direction to let the House of Assembly to go paperless and for us to be able to conduct our business online in a secured environment, may I add, Mr. Speaker, as secure as you can be, because the best of systems can be hacked, but as secure as can be. And this falls right in line with what we're doing with e-government, with some of the amendments we have made since COVID to make sure that it reflects the reality on the ground during pandemics and catastrophic events, so that the government, Mr. Speaker, can continue to go from strength to strength. Mr. Speaker, we know that the e-government some of it was worked on before we took office, and the leader of the opposition, I always give him credit, he worked on it as a junior minister, and I know that he's proud of that work, and we were able to build on that and add some other things, and we have already done the first reading and we'll bring it to life. I always tell him, though, that, that even although he says many things, he never explains us what happened, why he didn't get his colleagues to bring it forward. But that is something, one of these days when he and I retire, we'll be able to sit down over a drink and discuss how come that didn't happen. But I want him to know that the second and third reading of them are coming up, and I welcome him to second them when it comes, because he did do some of the legwork. And unlike, other persons politically, we give credit to anyone that did work before. And we know that the government is a continuum, but also we know that not everything that was worked on before, Mr. Speaker, or that is being brought now, I'll put it that way, was worked on before. But at the same time, too, we give credit where credit is due. But we have been able to work with CUT during the lockdown on some areas that needed addressing, because we didn't factor, see you, sorry, we didn't see you, we didn't factor in certain areas that we, that was not foreseen until you went through COVID-19 and you understand, wait, we really could have a pandemic of this nature, and other areas that we needed to look at. So I'm really proud of this moment and that we can come together as a house to get this done so that generations born and unborn, when they reach this House of Assembly and they see the efficiency and many other things that will be added on to the house, whether it be the physical, the structure, the technology, the laws, that this House of Assembly, no matter what side of the aisle you are, and participated in a meaningful way to ensure that quality, substance, and also depth was the order of the day during the tenure of this House of Assemblies. So with that, Mr. Speaker, it's a great day in the territory when we can now move to work towards getting the House of Assembly to now be fully paperless and increase the efficiency of the House and thereby the productivity of the people. Because the more efficient the House is, the more productive we are for the people. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm glad to be in this House as a member during this time, and with great honor, but yet humbleness, I move this motion.
Speaker, I rise to second this resolution, and while I'm on my feet, I'll make a brief contribution. Mr. Speaker, I agree with Premier that I think the time has come for us to start to move towards a more efficient, more modern House of Assembly. And an important component of that is through technology and revolutionizing the way that we do business here as a House. The record will reflect my insistence over the many years on ensuring that we move in this direction. Process was started as it relates, the Premier alluded to the e-government process that ushered in a gradual change in terms of moving towards a digitized government, a digitized territory. And I, without reluctance, agreed to serve as a deputy chair. As you know, my background comes from technology, and I think it's important for me to add my knowledge and my experience to this process, to support this process, because at the end of the day, this is not about any side of the aisle. It's about ensuring that the institutions that we all serve work in the best interest of the people. And this territory has given me much in way of education in this particular field, and I think it's important for me as a citizen of this territory to give back of that monies that were spent on my education and my skills and knowledge to help this House, help this process move forward. I think it's important. I think we were able to get the Cabinet Office digitized in this way. I think it's a model that we could use and work from. There are other models out there. I think the committee's remit will be to see what is the best approach for us in as shortest time as possible to get this implemented for the best sake of the House and the people of this territory which we serve. So I fully support this motion. I think it's a long time in coming. COVID has taught us the importance of information communication technology, ICT, and the role it will play in terms of the whole new dynamic that is upon us in terms of COVID. Whole issue of homeschooling, work from home, distance learning, all the different things that has come to the forefront because of COVID-19 underscores the importance of us building an ICT infrastructure, ICT platform in the territory to ensure that we could function and function effectively as a House, as a government, and as a territory. So, Mr. Speaker, this is the first step, and I'm hopeful that as a chairman, you will ensure that we have robust discussions and timely meetings on this particular piece of this particular resolution as we seek to implement a modern system within the House of Assembly. So this piece of resolution has my full support, and I look forward to the discourse and us once and for all moving towards a fully digitized House of Assembly.
Thank you. Honorable members, the floor is now open on the resolution before this House. I recognize the Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity to rise and give my support to this resolution establishing this special select committee. I'll be extremely brief, just to say that I commend your leadership, Honorable Speaker, for taking this initiative forward. And I also commend the leadership of the Honorable Premier, who, under his leadership, the green agenda is moving quickly, moving rapidly. We have solar coming forward under this administration. And we also are going into e-government. So it's been spoken about for quite a number of years, but under this administration, it is coming to fruition. It's moving quite rapidly to fruition. And this will save paper, and it will make us more efficient. It's going to save money. It's going to save time. It's going to help us to be more efficient about our business. I take this opportunity as well to praise the clerk, the deputy clerk, and the rest of the staff in House of Assembly. Truly hard workers, truly efficient at their job, and I'm grateful that this will help to make their jobs easier, which is already a difficult job. And I also take this opportunity to praise the Cabinet Secretary, Ms. Sandra Ward, who has availed herself to assist with the process. She gave us a presentation already and explained it very well. And she has presided in the cabinet under these types of processes. And I think she's done an extremely good job. And with her assistance, I know that we'll get something that is fit for purpose. The system that we presently use in cabinet is excellent. It's excellent. And if that is any indication, I think it will make our lives a lot easier here in the House of Assembly. So, Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity, and I'm happy to be a part of this committee, and I give my full support to this resolution. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I thank the member for the 7th District for his contributions. Floor remains open. I recognize the Junior Minister for Trade and Economic Development and Territorial Member, the Honorable Shireen D. Flax Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I fully support this resolution. I have on many occasions spoken of the amount of paper that we use, and it will make the process a lot more efficient, as well as we will be able to save quite a bit of money due to not having to use paper. I can say for myself, Mr. Speaker, that every morning my husband holds that bag with all of those documents. It gets very heavy on many, many occasions, and he walks it to the ferry dock every morning. And he meets me every evening to collect the bag with all of the documents that we have. And as the Premier has rightly said, we have to read and go through everything. So the work is not only being done in the House or when you're in your office, Mr. Speaker. You must take home a lot of these documents. So I am certainly very happy to support an initiative such as this, and we continue to go green in the British Virgin Islands to become a more efficient economy, and society. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I thank the Junior Minister for her contributions. The floor remains open. I recognize the Minister for Natural Resources, Labor and Immigration, and member for the 9th District, the Honorable Vincent O. Whitley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too rise to support this motion here to move the House of Assembly paperless. As Minister for the Environment, it pleases me greatly because I see the amount of paper that the current system produces. As a proponent of technology, I'd also like to ask members to make sure when you go paperless, we shouldn't just automate the old system, but use the new system to do things we couldn't do before. We've seen many instances in the past where persons went from typewriters to word processors just to do letters on a computer. That's all you're doing with a computer. You're wasting the ability of the technology. This technology will let us do more than simply remove paper. It's going to allow us to do things that we couldn't do before. Maybe having sittings remotely and so forth. So I thank the Premier for bringing this motion, and I fully support it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. If there are no other members willing to contribute to the debate, I will ask the mover of the motion, the Premier and Leader of Government Business, to wrap up.
Yep. Mr. Speaker, I couldn't say better than all of what other speakers have said. And I would have been surprised if our two members from our sister islands didn't speak, because they have to travel longer than us with those bundles of papers from their house to the boat, to the ferry boat, to the ferry boat, to the House of Assembly and vice versa, into the office. So I know that our members from the sister islands would be more than happy that we have moved in this direction, and that we're not just saying it, that we are doing it. This is one of the things that was in the budget address. So I'm glad that we are moving on it with haste. It is one of the plans that we have as a government, and we're fulfilling this one aspect of the plan right away. And I am glad that the whole entire House have come in agreement to get this done right away. And the Deputy Premier rightfully said that we're moving towards the e-government and the efficiency that it will bring. And our commitment to move towards e-government is not just talk. It will be seen in the suite of legislations that we have already brought back to this House since the prorogation of the House for the first reading. And we will be going into the second and third reading of them, and then we'll be championing the cause of the entire public service to be online. Mr. Speaker, the direction this government is going is one in which we have created new paths and also built on the strength of some of the legwork that was done before by the leader of the opposition when he was in his position. And as I stated before, he would tell me one of these times when we retire, why didn't his group bring forward his fine work? But when it comes to the House now, he would see some of the additions that we have made and also bring forward some of the legwork that he has done. And we're not ashamed to give you the credit. We will never be that way at all. This country sent us all away, spend money on us, as you rightfully said, with the scholarship program, another entity of which the Minister of Education has brought back on stream. That went out since Irma, and because of financial concerns, it couldn't come in, in 2017 or 18. could not come in at that time, it seemed like, but we have finally reinstated the Scholarship Abroad program, and this year I think is about 32 students have been selected by the committee to go study abroad in different areas to help strengthen not only the territory but themselves and their families. That is what a government is about, even in the midst of hard times. Even in the midst of challenges with revenue, we still ensure that certain things we keep doing. And going into e-government and having the House go to what we will call e-House, if for a choice award, is the only way to go to increase efficiency, productivity. And can I tell you that once you improve efficiency and productivity, you automatically improve revenue. And yes, revenue is a factor now. Because where we are going, Mr. Speaker, this is just one spoke in the cog of the wheel towards where we're going with technology. And I am looking forward to this committee getting this moving expeditiously. And I have no doubt with you, Mr. Speaker, being selected as a chair, and our deputy being the leader of our opposition, I know that you all have a harmonious relationship. And I know that this will move expeditiously so that the House can be proud with all the other members on board, that within a few months' time this will be done. So I'm glad to see both of you working together for the betterment of the people of the Virgin Islands and the rest members on the committee. This is what true BVI love is about, putting any differences aside for the best interests of the people of the Virgin Islands. So, Mr. Speaker, when we move on to the e-government, what we're going to recognize too is that persons in Anegada can sit in their living room just like they're doing right now and pay bills, pay their income tax online with their credit card, pay their Social Security, pay whatever they have to pay to labor. This is where we're going. And it's not just a talk shop, it's in progress, it's legislation is here, it's going to be put in place. This is where this government is taking this territory. If that's not a plan, I don't know what is. One of many plans. And persons in Jost Van Dyke. I have an at-large team, especially the two women, once you leave out any sister island at all, they come forward backing. So I don't make the mistake. And they're correct. Those sister islands have been knocked about for quite a while, and the kind of TLC that they're getting, that I told some of them that still fussing about a few things, and they're right with some of what they're saying, that give us time. I know that you want a custom of love. Because there's so many things on those sister islands we're doing. Dark Hill Road was paved, the administration building was fixed and reopened, named after one of our legends, and then you also have the ports building that's going to host not only the ferry boats, but also electricity and other utilities. And you have the road that is being patched going over on the eastern side. The minister is doing a lot of road work over there and a lot of water work over there. And you also have the road that is being cut and going up the road there, up from by Rudy's, Superette, the back road. That's been done and being used, almost finished. Plenty more to do, Jost Van Dyke, but a lot being done. When we hit Virgin Gorda, Mr. Speaker, oh my, if I start here, I'll forget. I'll forget, because we have the administration building in the Sound being worked on, the administration building in the Valley being worked on, the playground at the Robinson O'Neill being fixed. You have the agriculture station there. We just got the building for that, and that's going ahead. We purchased land based on the value of the land to soon separate the cargo and the ferry. And we have so many things in Virgin Gorda, the fixing of the road. We have one of our lads that does a business thing with them, and many other things that we do have done in Virgin Gorda, and many more to come. We have had a forum with a lot of the contractors so that we could bring them up to speed. We're doing a stimulus for business, a stimulus for fishing and farming, and we just started that over in Anegada and some other things that we did in Anegada. I have yet to do in the Minister of Education, doing some work over there with them, with getting certain things up to par under his ministry, including the school. So we may never get everything done, and we will not get everything done. Not that we don't want to, but it's just not possible nowhere in the world. But when the facts are read out, it will be read out that this government, in the middle of a pandemic with limited resources, got more done, if you look at it per capita with projects, than when we had way more resources than we have now. And we did a lot more with less, as the Deputy Speaker said. And now that we're on the road to have paperless in the House of Assembly, another promise made, a promise kept, a promise that will be delivered. And I can't wait. I cannot wait for when we say aye to this, and more so aye to the suite of e-government legislation. That suite of legislation, Mr. Speaker, like I said, that to know that persons in Jocelyn Dykes or in Anegada or in Virgin Gorda or any Sister Island, or even right here in Tortola, sitting in the relaxation of their homes, can now sit and do business with government without having to physically come in. I know that Honorable Shireen Flax-Shaz and Honorable Sherry Castro, those two ladies back there, lads, your hearts will be filled with joy. That don't mean y'all not coming down still, you know. You have to come down. But that also shows that we can have House of Assembly wherever we are remotely, whenever it's an emergency and we can't meet. Because not only that we have passed the legislation in this House by this government to have House of Assembly held remotely in case of a disaster or pandemic and we cannot meet together, we have passed that modernizing the House. But now we are passing that all the transactions of the House can be done electronically. That's progress. That's innovation. But I want to add one more innovation, Mr. Speaker, before I take my seat, because, Mr. Speaker, it's good to say these things because sometimes there are persons who will never say them and never admit to them, but the truth doesn't need anyone's belief. We have seen the Minister of Natural Resources with the border management system, another innovation. And last week we did a test run where we stood in line, the Minister, his PS, the Minister of Natural Resources, his PS, Dr. Potter, myself. The AG jumped the line, but she was still there, right there in the line. And we all were supposed to walk with our passports. When I stretched my mind, I didn't have mine, so I was given a passport, and they didn't even give me one. I was a male. When they scanned it, it was a female passport. But the aim of it was not to have your real passport, but to show the system was working. And to know now that we have invested in our first couple of months so much money in this system. And now, Minister of Labor, I have to commend you and your staff, immigration, your PS and all of them, and this whole government, and the AG office who helped work on the documents, and the company that's doing it. So we will be able now to launch where you come in, and all the information is there at the immigration officer's disposal, and also in terms of the senior persons would have it. So if there's a query, you can be handled. And in a few months' time, less than 3 months, we will have 3 kiosks here to start with. And those kiosks will allow us to deal with belongers so that they don't even have to come to a living person anymore and waste time. They're already ordered, they're supposed to be here in 3 months' time. And you can just come to the airport or Rotong or whatever and just, like everywhere else in the world, swipe your card as a belonger and go through that line, and it registers, and you just keep going. That's innovation. That's a government working for its people. So yes, we have many more things to do, but as we do, we will say. And you don't have to take my word for these things. All you have to do is stick around with time and see if they are implemented, and if they are so. We have the airports portal that has been launched, and Mr. Speaker, that's necessary, because we have to know that persons that are coming in here with COVID-19 have a negative test before they reach. We have to try to protect ourselves, and that has to be entered in the site. And also when you land, you know that you're going to do a test as soon as you land, and then on the 4th day. That's innovation. So, Mr. Speaker, this government is on the move with its plans for the people in all areas. And right now we're on the technology side for the House of Assembly and for the government overall in terms of government functioning of government daily. So, Mr. Speaker, I thank all my members, because there's no front bench and back bench in this government. We're all in the same car. People like to say who in the front seat or who in the back, but one thing I know, once the car starts to move, unless you get out, that car, wherever it's going, we're together on it. And we cannot do it unless we all say yes. So when the Minister of Natural Resources has achieved these things, it's not him alone. It's all of us, four at large, and the ministers. It's a united government, because when it goes wrong, they give it to all of us. So when it goes right, it has to be all of us. So I want to thank everyone for that. And one of the other innovative areas that the Minister of Natural Resources is working on is an idea that the Deputy Speaker, Honorable Neville Smith, has stated, which is for us not to increase the percentage for unemployment, but rather if it's 8.5%, make it now 7.5%, and allow 1% to go towards unemployment benefits. And the Minister of Natural Resources will be bringing some legislation so that we can get that done and start to get some unemployment funds and some other areas that we have seen how to start the pension fund without being stressful to the people in a time of a pandemic when persons don't have, but to make sure that we put things in place so that they can have when things go bad again or any challenges in the future. That's a government working for its people. So I want to thank Honorable Neville Smith for that idea. And the reason I have to do it is that we sat here busting our brains. How do you get it done without charging the people of the Virgin Islands a dime more? And Mr. Speaker, he came up with it. All of this is innovation. So, Mr. Speaker, on that note, I'm pleased that we're moving in this direction of innovation. We're doing so together. I thank you.
I thank you. Honourable members, a motion has been moved and seconded for the reduction of the use of paper in the House of Assembly via setting up a special select committee to move the process forward. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. The motion is passed. I call upon the clerk.
Item number 6.2, private members' business. Item number 7, other business.
In compliance with the agreement between the leader of government's business and the leader of the opposition, we will not have any other business. Therefore, I call upon the clerk.
Item number 8, adjournment.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House be adjourned sine die.
Is there a second?
Mr. Speaker, I second the motion.
A motion has been made and seconded that this House be adjourned sine die. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. This Honourable House now adjourned sine die.